Hello everybody. Welcome to the Ask the Trainer Dustin Valkema edition. It's a Dustin Valkema special, and I'm joined here by my two friends, which I'm going to introduce, although they need no special introduction, in a moment. So we're going to begin very quickly with the housekeeping, and I'm going to share my screen. I'm doing producing today, so I'm going to do a lot of mistakes. I'm going to mix things up. So please hang in there, right? I need your moral support. So first of all, let's go to the screen. I think this is the screen. No, that's the wrong screen. Haha, that was a preview of what you're going to see. So let's begin. Number one, Maxon events page. That's a page you go to see all the events and videos and what's going on currently and in the future. There's a ton of stuff to do. You can filter by region, by dates, and search for particular events. Number two, Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. All the great content we do lives on that page, alongside the Maxon YouTube channel, the Red Giant channel, and everything else that's affiliated to Maxon. Number three, Maxon certification. If you want to become a Maxon Cinema 4D Pro user or certified trainer, go here and get all the information you need. The design and animation tour is going on, and on May the 11th, which is today, it's in Denver. So follow along at this particular page, and I think you're going to be entertained and educated, as it's customary with our shows and everything we do online and in person. Now let's go to the fun stuff. Go to this website, Maxon Merch Store, my Shopify, and I'm looking around because I have to do oh, you can't see my face, so that's cool. So let me just find the appropriate link. There you go. That's the appropriate link. And the code for the month for all the shows to get free swag when you put that passcode is Compositing 3D, no spaces or caps. Compositing 3D. That will be Charlie, Oscar, Mike, Papa, Oscar. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but you understand the point. And I forgot my note. It says on Thursday, May 11th, which is today, we're going to do the special. So time for the introductions, and let's show our friends' faces here. There we go. And let me turn this off. Producing is a very hard job.
Masterful.
Masterful. Okay, not bad. Okay, so I'm accompanied by the one and only Dustin Valkema. He is a Maxon certified master trainer, 3D generalist, and composite photographer with over 15 years of industry experience. He's now focused on education and mentorship through his company CG Hacks, which provides VFX overlays, 3D textures, and material libraries and other resources to bridge the gap between 2D and 3D workflows. Dustin's passion for helping others stems from his own experiences with failure, and that's very important. I always emphasize on that, and learning from them. All right, don't fail without learning. He believes that with a bit of creative tenacity and willingness to learn, anything is possible in the world of digital art. And you will find him on cghacks.com, and you'll find all the links over there. By the way, the name Valkema, Valk means falcon. That's such a cool thing to say. Now, let's go on to my second. Again, I'm turning things on and off. Our co-host, and well, actually not co-host, Dr. Sassi is the host. Dr. Sassi is a senior trainer. He is the embodiment of an encyclopedia of cinematography with 1 million years of combined experience from disciplines like architecture, cinematography, fine arts, and many others. He has made literally thousands of tutorials over the years. And I'm also very proud to call him a friend, a mentor, and a colleague. And I say that very humbly and with great pride at the same time. So while Dustin and Dr. Sassi are going on with the show, I'll remain in the background, screw things up, mess things around, and I'm going to be doing some producing, and I'll be dealing with the questions, if anything needs to be answered, and so forth. I'll be moderating and so forth. So please, 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 when you ask a question, preface it with question, capitalized. So in the comments, I can quickly tell what is a question and what is a general comment or something like that. And with that said, welcome to Ask the Trainer. I'm going to remove myself from here. I'll be in the background watching things. Take it away, co-host.
Hello, everyone. And I can't write in the comments. So I have to say thank you for the warm welcome. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. JM Sarita Yusul. Welcome to the show and everyone else. And welcome, Dustin. I have prepared
Thanks.
some questions that goes maybe very close, and we hope we get the doors wide open to the studio from Dustin, get some insights and maybe motivational stuff. And so let's get started. Um, we want to take a look what Dustin has done so far in his life, maybe with his camera, with Cinema 4D, with 3D, and so on. And so let's start with the first question. And I want to have that in the tone of Ratatouille. Everyone can cook. And so, is it true to you that everyone can create and express themselves in art?
100%.
Cool.
It's an interesting question. Um, it like art as a creative, right? Like there are many forms of art. For instance, my adopted father is a master carpenter. Um, and I didn't realize until I got a bit older and more wise, right? Like a lot of the times we think that, that certain things are just jobs and that's just what people do. And then, you start to realize it and pay attention. And so once you start to pay attention to the different perspectives and different intricacies of different of other skill sets, you realize that art actually, has a lot less to do with, just putting a label on something and more the passion and the creativity behind it. um and so it, like watching him over the years create things right from nothing. It could be a block of wood that turns into a bowl or, dinnerware and what have you. There's a lot that goes into that. And so for me, I think that's, anybody can create. And I feel like anybody, has their own form or, of passion that's put into specific projects. And it doesn't always have to be what we label art. um because it's, I feel it's a lot deeper than that. So yes.
Yeah. Which brings me up to the first point. I think everyone wants to have his own voice in the work that we present or create, and to find themselves inside of what they have created. If you are a carpenter or maybe just a cook, or not just a cook, if you are a cook, a chef, or a 3D artist, anything. So how do you think, or what is the best way to find your own voice? Is it work, 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 go through a lot of stuff? And do you have maybe some images to show us where you started and how you shaped your own voice?
Yeah. So I guess before we get into any, type of a showcase side, I think that the best way to find your voice is to explore. um I don't know if you can hear that. We've got weird horns or something playing in the background. That's odd. But exploration is hands down for me where I found my voice. So when I started learning 3D or even Photoshop, I actually started early in high school. And I was the kid that screwed around a lot. Mr. Slakta, I appreciate your patience if you ever see this. So I screwed around a lot in high school, in our design class, playing with Photoshop, learning how to do different things. I really did look in a bunch of boxes to find some of my old artwork, but I do have it somewhere, and it's hilarious for me to look at now. It's been up in the storage attic for quite a while. Um, but once I started experimenting with Photoshop, that kind of became a passion for me. Prior to that, throughout middle school, I've always loved to sketch and had little sketchbooks and things like that. Um, but I had a few, you know, key people throughout my life that would introduce me to different mediums. You know, so getting into chalk and pastels, colored pencils, different painting techniques, you know, airbrushing, things like that. Like I've been very fortunate to have a lot of different teachers or mentors that have allowed me to flourish and really push my creativity. And so all of that, you know, kind of formed where I'm at now, you know, is just being able to, you know, to create. Um, and so yeah, it's been a very interesting journey, but being able to explore and allowing yourself to explore and not always thinking that everything you do has to be a job. Um, you know, I see a lot of people more focused on, you know, beginning something and figuring out how they're going to charge for it than just beginning that thing and learning the fundamentals, learning the quote unquote rules and all of these things. And a lot of times that can be crippling, you know, to focus so much on the job first. um, Now with that being said, you know, I did start off charging for my work very early. Um, and what that did is actually led me to a lot of burnout, because I was, you know, charging very cheap at the time. I think I was doing some album covers and various things like that that you will all see here in a moment. Um, you know, but I would do this work and I would charge, say, $25 for an album cover. You know, this is kind of a break and me learning how to get into like the business and freelance side of things and all of it all at the same time. So I was into, oh man, it was video work and audio and what I, you know, audio engineering and sound design and making beats and doing, you know, audio recording, had a little studio built, and then getting into 3D and then photography. It was a kind of the one-stop shop for everything. And that exploration was both amazing and like just draining at the same time, because I love to learn. I was just doing too much at once, and that eventually led me to, you know, kind of crashing and burning, if you will. I had an extreme burnout, and that's where I decided to go to college and you know, get into a different space, which ultimately led me full circle on back to doing the same thing that I was doing prior, but better and much wiser at that point. So it's interesting. So if we want to show the screen, we can talk a little bit about, you know, kind of what the journey looked like. So here's my pure ref board with a whole lot of stuff. So this is a fairly interesting section here. If I move this back over to this side, these are things that I used to do quite a bit. This is where, following high school and things of that nature, like this is what led me down the road of doing Photoshop composites initially. So I ended up getting into the local, I guess you could say, kind of hip hop scene and various things, doing album covers and mixtape covers for artists. I would do stuff that was more like promotional, like some of these here, you know, just based on, you know, kind of some of the mainstream rappers at the time, and, you know, things to really promote the work. Um, but this is also what led me down the road into photography, because what I would get is a lot of, you know, different customers that would contact me and they would send me cell phone photos, things of that nature, and the quality just didn't line up. And so I would end up, you know, doing half, you know, kind of barely mediocre work. Like it was generally pretty bad compared to my state now. We'll talk about that journey process probably a bit later. Um, you know, and I decided, hey, I want to offer, you know, a better quality than what I am. And so that actually led me into borrowing an old, I believe it was like an 8 megapixel Olympus camera from a friend, and started doing photography at that point. I remember it was it was Cowboy Studio, I believe was the name of the lights that I had gotten. It was $100 pair off of Amazon,
Yeah.
and I had gotten a green screen and I started shooting. Didn't know anything about RAW, was shooting in automatic in JPEG, and it was still better quality than what I was getting off of the cell phones at that time. And so, I started with that process. And, getting into photo composites like this one here specifically, there's a lot you can do. Making sure the light and the shadows and all of these things line up, is great. But at the same time, there's also quite a bit that I knew could be better and possibly easier. And so that's where I started to get into the 3D side.
And yeah,
Go ahead.
let me ask one question. I guess everyone wants to know, when you have one shop, how to get to the next, how to expose yourself to your clients, or how to find them. Because when you say you were with one object into the race, but it's not that people line up and say, hey, now we want to have this, or how did it work for you that you got more and more exposure?
It was actually just doing the work, and networking. So oftentimes it would be, finding somebody and saying, I guess the first way, the first base is doing the work first. If you want to reach a certain level of client, you should probably be doing the work at the level that that client demands. And you can find that, for my current stuff, in product rendering and so on. It's as simple as a Google search and, find out what they have on their website and so on, and do things like, do case study projects specifically for that. A lot of it's networking. Like nowadays, a lot of my freelance 3D work specifically is by word of mouth. So I've done stuff for certain clients. A lot of them are still under NDA and so on. But it's word of mouth, and it goes, it's just from person to person, and, building kind of an internal and then external, web of network through that type of stuff. But doing the work first, and that's not to say that you have to spend forever learning how to do the things. Because honestly, especially with the way that information is available these days, it really doesn't take too long. But what it does take is a bit of tenacity, and you have to put yourself out there, which is something that I honestly struggle with personally these days. It's hard to keep up on social media and the trends and everything all the time. But
Yeah.
finding a way to make yourself relevant in order to start that process is key. And, for everybody, that's going to be different. For me, for example, like I am not huge on social media and doing projects for the likes and getting, just doing the thing. I like to have a little bit that, I do for me and you guys never see. In fact, like it's been bad enough to the point I kind of laugh at myself now, right? Because I've been bad with this lately in the past couple of years, where I've done a lot of work for Comic-Cons and shooting cosplayers, and I just have boatloads of images that you will never find on Instagram or, TikTok or any of that.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to a point to where, I've had to find out like where my validation points sit, for me. And it's not always having the most, business and doing, like having 100,000 clients. Like I've kind of whittled it down to where I'd love to have, a good core base of clients that I'm working with, and then be able to kind of go back and forth and decide, what I want to do and where I want to pivot. Some of that has to do with the implementation of CG hacks a bit more recently. And getting into the business side of that. But the other side of it is just that, at some point we want to be artists, and we want to create. And so it's kind of nice after years to have a freedom to pick and choose your battles, if you will.
Yeah. And exactly, I think many people want to get where you are. So when I see, for example, I think it's iced tea in the right lower corner, that would be something that maybe intimidate many people to say, my skills are not there, I can't work with these great names or so. How to overcome the self-doubts, how to get to the point where you say, okay, I know I don't know everything. That's of course a good start to admit. But at one point I have to get out. I have to make something. I can't wait until I'm 50 or 70 years old, totally skilled, and then I can finally do something. I have to do it now. Now is my best time. So how
Yeah.
to get over your self-doubt?
Well, it's actually a very tough question, because
sorry.
I know it's good, because I do deal with that. Even, I mean, I'm here, right? And and imposter syndrome is a real thing. Whether you're an imposter, mentally, like getting into the space, oh, I'm not good enough, like all of these self-sabotaging thoughts are always going to be there at some point. I don't feel that you're ever going to, unless you're like an extreme narcissist, I don't think you're ever going to get to a point where that's completely gone. Because as an artist, I have the perspective of knowing that I am one in a sea of many, and there are plenty of artists and creatives, and that I feel are maybe better than me technically, maybe better than me creatively, like yourself and Thanasis. I would put you there. Like, you guys can run circles around me in the creative technical space and problem solving, things like that. And if you allow yourself to sit in that self-sabotaging mindset, like, you will never go anywhere, because the energy just doesn't allow you to do that. So how I get over that is just by doing it. And I don't mean that to sound like very like profound, like, but like, you start, and that's the biggest key. So for me, I had a few things, like, I'll break it down and we'll get real really quick. I had a few things in my past, as creatively, for instance, I had a family that was really, huge into the Christian faith and religion. And I used to draw a lot of creatures. For instance, I draw creatures, kind of character design, just like crazy looking demon stuff, and I was, counseled on that, because it didn't look like something that was acceptable. And so that pushed me mentally, pushed me out of sketching, like that pushed me out of that release. Um, and it wasn't for many years that I was able to actually like want to start sketching again, or wanting to get into certain things again, because I kept having that thought process, of like, hey, this isn't good enough, like, this isn't good, you can't do this, like, stay away from it. And it's not that I believed what they believed, it's more that it was a thing for me that I was putting walls up and wouldn't allow myself to get into those feelings, and like the thought process that at one point crippled me, as a young one. So there's a lot of that happens, and there's a lot of reasons that people will have self-sabotaging thoughts, whether it's imposter syndrome, whether it's just low self-esteem and low self-worth. I struggle with it too at times. And ultimately, what I had to realize, and this is primarily from actually talking to other people about this, is that everybody has their stuff, right? Everybody has their problems. And it's just, there's a difference between the people that are able to like pull themselves together and push forward through a project or a learning curve, or various things, and whatever it is they want to do. It's the people that ultimately make the choice themselves, that like, hey, this is important enough for me, and I'm going to push through it. And that's kind of where, when I talk about tenacity, like, that's where it came from. I've just been doing this stuff for a very long time, and I've gotten to a point where now I'm comfortable doing it. But it's very interesting. It's an interesting question. So yeah,
I have something to say on that
yeah.
note. that a level of narcissism, even to the extreme, is actually not bad, because we're talking about something very personal. This is not, our industry is not a factory. It requires, well, it doesn't apply to me, but for people that make art, it requires you bringing out a lot of your inner self. And being a narcissist, I believe, is a good thing, because it frees up and it sort of pushes aside the whole imposter syndrome thing. If you are bad at what you do, the market is going to chew you up and spit you out. That's it. The only way to make sure that you take advantage of your best capabilities is to go against the modesty, which is very natural to most artists, and be narcissistic about your work. Be, a high level of Dunning-Kruger is not bad, because the market itself is going to correct you. Whereas if you hold it inside, you will never show your true artistic self. That's my opinion. Be brave, be brass, and be, I don't know what other word I can use. Be very edgy with what you want to present. Don't have second thoughts, because your true self lies in that, ego. And I say it in the best possible way. That's my opinion. I'm going to hide myself again.
Yeah, come in and drop a bomb and then hide. Okay, Thanasis, we see.
Yeah.
So
when you say about ego, I think there are two egos in everyone. One is where you imagine yourself how someone would respond to you, and then you don't get it. That is leading to depression. And then there is an ego inside of you, the other, the good one, that designs a future for you. And you get excited about, and you grow into that. That's the good one that pushes you forward. Every time you feel good, it's something that might be the right way to do. And so when I listen to your words about that people couldn't see what you're doing with your creature design and so on, I call this always conditioning. So you get conditioned to not like it, to think you are wrong or whatever. But as an artist, you have your perspective. No one else can have that perspective, because you occupy physically really that space from where you look at. And this is a lifelong experience that you express. The problem is only to find people who understand that. That's clear. But I think you found this with this work, and you continued to expand your market. Is that correct?
Yeah, and so to follow up on Thanasis's statement there, I do agree to an extent. I think that I think that there is a balance. So when I look at my work, for instance, right? Like I understand journeys. Like I will tell somebody that I've just met that I'm an amazing, like really cool, like I'm an amazing artist. I create some of the best work out there. And there's a difference for me between confidence and like really pushing those boundaries of like forceful. But I'm also one to understand that where I'm at in my journey is different from an artist that's just beginning. And I also understand that in my journey, even this far in, I'm still beginning compared to many. And so for me, it's kind of, finding a balance between, confidence and confidence and cocky, if that makes sense. And not necessarily on my personal feelings, but how I push that, into the space. So yeah, it definitely is. It's a good topic. That's a good question. we
Yeah.
could probably mold that one over for quite a while.
Yeah, but back to your work, and you were starting to talk about light and all of that. And I know, as you have already introduced, you have worked in practical terms and with cameras, with pastel, as you said. You are familiar with woodworking based on your family. And so there's a lot of stuff coming together in one point inside of you. So, how do you take advantage of it and decide which way you go, which direction you push your work? Because give the same material to 10 different artists, you get 10 different results. So how do you get your result? What is your secret sauce? Or
Well, I'm lazy. So but to elaborate, um that's actually changed quite a bit for me over the years. On how I achieve it. Um my love for contrasting images has been there from the beginning. You can see it in the album covers and the mixtape work and things like that. Like that has been there. And in fact, when we back out of this whole pure ref thing here, it all looks very similar. I'm lazy. Yeah, that's me. It all looks similar and fairly cohesive. And so when you look at it from a distance, a lot of those a lot of the older artwork still holds up, which actually has taught me a lot. Like I thought about this here for a minute when I put all of this on this board. I was like, wow, like I paid attention to a lot of things that didn't matter.
can we see it again?
And so yeah, let's kind of look. So I'll show you what I'm talking about.
Yeah, please.
So we'll see some of my older work here, and these will be some thumbnails. We'll just kind of like move those out. But when you look at this work here over on the left-hand side to the work that's on the right, like, aside of the flashy text and maybe even some brighter, colors and whatnot, like a lot of this stuff, like just the general, contrast and flow of it holds up to more of my recent photography and compositing work on the right-hand side. And so, what I've been noticing is that, over time, what I've found to focus on is the large details and only hone in on those like nitpicky small details when I need to. And usually it's when a client or a customer will call it out. I've no longer been, very tied into the idea of getting married to my time for a project. For instance, shots like this one here, I used to spend a whole lot of time retouching in at a pixel level, would go in and retouch and retouch and retouch. And then, and part of that was an ego thing. I'm like, hey, I don't need a plugin to retouch a face or retouch a body or do these things. I don't need a plugin for that. And then I realized that when I would sit there and I would spend 4 or 5 hours retouching, I would be burnt out and it would be hard for me to move on to another project. And so I started divorcing the time that was spent on remedial tasks that I'm doing every single time that didn't need to be perfect, right? If I'm talking Hollywood level commercial, like this has to be, the beauty, the perfect beauty glamour shot, that would be different. And so I started working with different tools and opening myself up to different things that expedited processes. And once I've done that, it allows me to work a lot faster and avoid burnout quite a bit. So, yeah. Next question.
I mean, normally we should talk a little bit about the pixel peepers and if we decide to work for pixel peepers or for people who love our expressions, our worldview. And I've made for movies typically the decision, if someone needs to stop my movie, then it's not longer a movie, it's a still. I make a movie, I don't make stills. So I have sometimes not seen my own mistakes. When I went to Technicolor to let it print on celluloid, the technician came and said, hey, look at here, there's a mistake. And I was so embarrassed. But no one on the whole film festival journey that I did for a year has seen that problem. So it's always a question, is it really important to fix all the dead pixels in a picture or so, or use a plug-in, I think Cosmo or Cocktail or whatever, to get the skin right. I think we can do these shortcuts as long as our integrity as an artist is given. So
yeah,
you asked for, yeah.
I think for me, what really pushed, what pushed me into being able to better make that judgment call was burnout. It was being burned out so many times because I would be fixing things that the customer, like you said, like you would notice something, and if you had gone back to change said thing, that would just probably take ages to do. Like it would be a lot harder to do, because once you focus on one problem, there's probably, once you lift the rug, there's a lot more problems there. And so after being burnt out so long, I started to just not care about certain things. And when I noticed a mistake, there's times where I've shipped a project and I'm like, you know what? Is this Dustin's thing? Is this me seeing this? Or is this something that the client will call? Oh, it's approved, like beautiful work, and this may have been after a couple review rounds. And then I see something and then I ship it and they're like, this is great. It's beautiful. Clients, I feel like it's their job, especially like art directors and things of that nature. Like it's their job to find flaws. And so what I've learned to do in more of my commercial work is let them call it out. Like you do what you need to do, and let them call it out, which is also why I feel that as an artist you shouldn't tie yourself, or tie your validation to the work that you're doing for clients. So you need to find a balance between, the work that you're doing there. It's kind of like a work-life balance, if you will, like the work that you do for clients versus your personal work and your expressive stuff. Because it is their job to nitpick it. And oftentimes, if you nitpick yourself before they nitpick it, you can waste a whole lot of time. And I've found myself in situations where I have gone and pre-critiqued work that I've met all of the criteria, what they had asked for. I went and nitpicked it, spent hours changing those things, and just actually would have them say, hey, can we add this thing that maybe I removed already? It just creates problems. So it's definitely a balance. So having a good understanding of what the deliverable is, what the quality standard is. If you can meet that quality and you can meet the look and so on, ship it, and they'll call out what's wrong with it, and you just have to be open to allowing them to do that. But this is also why I feel that having a process is so important, like a general workflow that you do. So, in 3D, it's like making sure that your client is approving your cameras and your lighting before you move on to materials, before you move on to post-production, and so on, so that you can, have a few places of stops, before you just hit that choke point of being in post. And then like, wait a minute, we need, a 3/4, the camera 3/4 turn this way. And you're like, wait, what? So it's, like having a good process in place, and allowing yourself the freedom to send things off. As long as you've met the base criteria, send it off and let them nitpick it.
And there's one book which I used to prepare some of these questions from Rick Rubin. And he says, after he has produced hundreds of bands, that sometimes to take all the mistakes and problems out of the picture, in our case here, would destroy maybe the work and take everything out that had the quality. I mean, he has produced a lot of punk bands. And if they would be perfect, there wouldn't be punk at all.
Right.
Just as a rough example. And perfectionism was something that stood out to me when I made the timestamps for all the shows where you presented. And you said something there, and I found you have created a balance inside where you say perfectionism is nice, but it's not really achievable, because in the moment you grow into your own ideas about perfectionism, that new space gives you ideas how you could even increase what would be perfectionism. So it's a target that is always a mile ahead of you, and that is exactly where you burn out. And burnout is not just being lazy or being tired. I have experienced that after my architecture time with 300 hours per month. I was burnt out. And this is not something that you overcome in just 2 weeks of vacation or so.
Right.
It's something serious. And I with all the respect to everyone who loves to make perfect images, but think always about the balance. And I think you have created for you a wonderful feeling where you touch in one or the other direction too much, and then you pull back and say, no, that's not Dustin. This is something else. That's not me.
Well, and that, like, I can elaborate a little bit here. Like, you know, finished, it's tough because I do talk a lot with myself or students or, you know, different things about, you know, the difference between finished and perfect. Like, I do feel that perfection is one of the biggest hurdles. Like, it can completely derail your creative process. It can completely derail, you know, like your progression as an artist. I used to be a perfectionist, and it was crippling because I couldn't get work out fast enough, even on, you know, the personal stuff. For example, when I started, it had to be perfect. I'm learning these things and doing all of this stuff, and I had to make sure it was perfect because I wanted it to be the best that I could, you know, that I could do. And I spent so much time. I mean, like, when I tell you that I was at that point charging like 25 or $50 for like just a single-sided album cover, you know, like, I was charging while I was learning it. And I made maybe 50 cents an hour, if that, because so much time goes into learning the different things, you know, that are wrapped around the creative side. Um, and you know, it's a time of my life that I would never, I don't regret it, right? But I wasted many years, you know, in the beginning, just nitpicking myself, you know, more than anybody else would nitpick me. So, you know, it's
Yeah.
definitely a big thing to start allowing yourself to pull away from perfectionist mindsets.
And that brings me maybe up to another question. Some call it happy accidents. They have their own value. What was the most significant, innovative happy accident in your career?
I don't even know if I know how to answer that one.
I'm sorry that I torture you so much.
No, no, I'm not sure if I know how to answer that one. Like a truly happy accident.
Well,
Um,
maybe Photoshop crashed and destroyed an image and you saw maybe a new aesthetic in it, or I
oh,
don't know.
I've had that. I've had that. I will say I've had that kind of thing where I've luckily crashed a project or corrupted a file. Um, you know, so we can kind of run with that. I mean, that's, you know,
Yeah,
like perspective. Again, it's like perspective is everything. When you spend so much time working on a project, um, you learn how to do things fast and you learn what you're doing wrong when you're in like a very crunch time frame.
yeah,
Um, you know, it's expedited the troubleshooting process for me like heavily when things go wrong. So, you know, that as a whole is something that I've dealt with, you know, dealing with, you know, maybe clients like all of a sudden rushing a project that needs to be done in, you know, half the time that they, you know, initially planned, and it's because XYZ thing wasn't communicated on their end. You know, you figure it out, or, you know, you adjust contracts and so on and different things, you know, whatever. But, you know, those, like, you control what you can control. And so, you know, as a creative, especially when you're talking like client work, like I have benefited very heavily from having, like, you know, unlucky things happening, software crashes, and it's because I've learned how to work, you know, just have a faster workflow for things. um but there definitely has been times where, you know, it hasn't gone so smooth. um I think one of the biggest happy accidents, and this is something probably a bit more personal just for me, um, you know, was like my college experience. And so I went to Full Sail University for compositing. That's what I majored in. It was after my burnout with, you know, doing all of this stuff years ago. Um, I had planned to get into motion picture compositing and so on. it was a really cool program, accelerated learning, all of that stuff, things I liked, like moving very quickly and getting there. Ended up graduating valedictorian and having all these different awards, all the things, advanced achievement, all that stuff. Um, and our second child was born, like right, in the middle of school. And so I decided that, based on my life, like I grew up without a father. I'm like, I don't want to really like be traveling from, studio to studio and contract to contract and different things. And I had plenty of friends in the industry that I like was watching do all of that. And so I decided to go into like commercial product rendering, which, is something I had already previously been doing, through school. But the different connections that I've made along the way was like the best part of that happy accident, because it opened me up to a world. I didn't really think of product rendering as, like a thing. Like I didn't think, I was like, oh, they just have agencies and studio. I didn't really think of it.
Can we see it?
So I was forced. What's that?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, I wasn't really forced. This is some of the stuff that I actually just wrapped up here a little bit, not too long ago. Some simple renderings and creative spaces for a company called Atlas Headrest. They actually build headrests for the Embody chair and the Aeron chair. Super cool. Can't afford the chairs, but someday it'll happen.
Should always
so,
ask for one example to keep.
yeah. And so, like getting into this space and building renders like this, you'll notice that a lot of the style of lighting, like the more dramatic pops and things like that, carry over from my photography, to the 3D side in pretty much almost any of it that I do. And so, it's what I've learned through that experience with with college, right? Is that, things are going to change. Your plans are going to change. And, ultimately we have decisions to make, which also ties back into like how to get started and how to, get into things. Like you just have to start it, like you have to control what you can control in a scenario. Right. I had a choice to make. Well, I can go the route of getting into this industry. I know the industry is like volatile, like people are in and out of studios and back and forth all the time. And do I want to work in that chaos or kind of truly just develop my own chaos, but, and be home, and be able to, push things on my own. And so I've learned, throughout some of those times to like actually just like slow down a little bit and, not think that everything has to happen now. I've been fortunate enough to work on a few projects, that, hopefully should be released fairly soon that, are bigger projects and, getting into that, like more Hollywood space, like larger commercial realm. But it's been really nice. Like being a freelance artist and doing like still renders is something that I never thought I was going to do, especially when I was in college and studying. I always expected to just be like dying in a studio somewhere. And just a lot of hours. And I have that experience of working in studios, and we worked way too many hours, and produced some pretty cool work. But
And
the freelance side is also nice.
and tell me more about light, cameras, renderings, and product stills, and your Cos-Play exploration.
Yeah. So wow. All right. So when I have little bits, right? I had a bit of getting started. We'll just talk like Cinema 4D and like kind of where I started in the 3D journey here a little bit. Um,
And
you
can you
know,
connect this always with photography so people see
yeah,
the connection?
yeah. And so like the way that I started what I will still consider photography, right? It's the sculpting of light and shadows, and there's more that goes into it. But on that side of it, it's the use of light and shadows and how all of that works. Like these were things that I used to do. I don't know if anybody knows of or remembers SoundClick. Um, You know, there's also like MySpace. I used to do MySpace layouts and all of that crazy stuff. You know, and I would be building these different header banners. This is kind of where I started in Cinema 4D, was building different header banners, doing the compositing in Photoshop, breaking out all the pieces, you know, to create different layouts. But the lighting that I've always chosen has been a bit more dramatic, you know, regardless of the subject matter. So this one here is like, this is my first product render ever, is the packaging for a product here. And so if you look at that compared to what I'm doing today, like I laugh. I'm like, oh man, like, you know, it's kind of crazy to think that that's where it started. I don't even know what I was thinking with the resolution of some of these images when I rendered them out, right? But you learn things. And so like this is, you know, where I started, the 3D side, building very basic, you know, things. I think I actually photoshopped the particles onto this before I sent it to the client, just to kind of show them what it looked like. You know, different things. So I started dark and dramatic. I learned how to light and manipulate light and shadows a bit more on the 3D side. And then I started kind of this process once I got into 3D. Now, these are a bit more updated renders from what I used to do at the time. I couldn't find them on the hard drive. But what I do on the 3D 2 photography side is I like to plan and do a lot of or pre-production for different photo shoots and lighting styles, concepts, things like that in 3D before I get to a Comic-Con. So I know kind of what general styles I want to shoot. And so this is what the kind of studio space looks like, which is my most common setup that I use at Comic-Con events. So I have the 12 by 56 strip boxes, and then now I have a 40-inch beauty dish that I use. And so I'm able to use those 3 lights to manipulate and create various styles of lighting based off of that. So both color, light direction, and so on. You know, this is something that I have used to lead me more into a lot of the cosplay photography that I'm doing. And so hopefully it's a bit more clear. You can see some of the similarities, you know, between how, you know, my product rendering looks versus my photography. And that's because I truly learned them not too far apart from one another, but I've always used everything that I've learned about photography to pull back into 3D, and then also the 3D side into photography. So what I've done is created like this ecosystem of understanding between what I can cheat on sometimes on the photography side and what I can do in post, and vice versa. So
Yeah.
it's kind of, go ahead.
Yeah, let me ask you, light is for me very important. And when I sometimes hear rules where a 3 is in, that pushes always a button. So just to be more precise, when you work with light, how do you use it to sculpt, to shape the figures that you photograph? How to use it to really bring out what these characters are supposed to be, and instead of just putting 3 lights around and that's it. I think you work more creatively to shape the faces, shape the silhouettes or whatever. And can you talk a little bit about this, how you set maybe some extra lights to accentuate something? Or
Yeah, so the first thing is understanding the fundamentals, you know, of what types of light create a silhouette well, right? So having the rim lights or the backlights, like those are going to create, you know, the silhouette, and really create separation is primarily the key there, is like creating separation from the subject to the background. Sometimes it's done with light, other times it's done with a depth of field. You know, whatever that may be, is having a good separation between your subject and the rest of the distraction, which is usually the background. But for me, like, to really it's honestly exploration. So, when I'm working on a shot or on, on set, when I'm at a Comic-Con, it's far more often like the specific needs of that person that comes in. So I set up as a vendor. So I don't actually have, scheduled shoots that I can really always plan in advance. So what that forces me to do is creatively like problem solve quickly and on the fly. So I don't always have a whole lot of time to put too much thought into it. But the practice that I've done on the 3D side is what allows me, to get in and create some pretty cool shots with different lighting effects, knowing when, so my Comic-Con setup is almost always as, you see in this shot here. It's almost always the two rim lights and the key light, and then knowing which light to turn off and on, or which one to gel, which one to move up and down if I need it. That stuff is just from practice. Ultimately, it's a setup that I like. In my head, if I think, hey, I want the sun in this one composite to be coming over, from the left side, then I know to have that specific rim light kicked on, and maybe I tone down the key light a little bit, so that I can look a bit more realistic. And you just go back and forth and explore. And, ultimately, this is what's led me, down the path. And now I just do what I think looks cool. And luckily, the people that are paying me this, they agree. But there is a lot of it, and when we talk about happy accidents, you had that question earlier. There's quite a few times where, I've had shots like this one here, for example, that, my key light doesn't flash. And it's just the recycle time. My lights are probably also getting a little bit old at this point for how much they were used. But, the recycle time is longer than the other two. And so it won't always just won't flash. And then I'm like, sometimes like you hit these type of like happy accidents where I'm like, I can totally create an amazing shot with this, just by that one thing happening and being okay with it. Like I remember when I showed the customer this, they were like, holy cow, like that's a completely like different look than anything I've had. And I was like, well, yeah, it was the best accident we've had today. So, you know, um,
But it needs the artist to spot the happy accident instead of the catastrophe.
right. So there was one
to see,
question.
to see the quality in it. Yeah, sorry.
So there was one question that I get a lot, and we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. I know we're running low on time here, so I'll try to make it fairly quick. Is to how we push past the certain barriers, kind of like the imposter syndrome, very similar to that. But how do we push through like creative block, and how we push through, I guess we'll say it's very similar. Maybe I'll just add to what I said earlier about, all of the self-sabotaging thoughts. So creative block, for me, I want to talk about that one first, is do everything you can do to actually avoid the burnout that created the creative block. That's one thing that I never really did, is I would just say, hey, I'm in a creative block. I'm going to do whatever thing, and it's just going to be what it is. And I'm going to push through and get through it. But there is something that actually caused that block to happen. And so a lot of times it can be burnout, and then you have to figure out why you burned out, right? So like you have to break down some of these things, to be able to push past that. But when you're starting off learning something new and you're getting into a new space, one of the biggest things that I think I could recommend is not forgetting all of your previous experience when you start learning something. So this is when, I teach photographers about 3D or 3D, photography and back and forth. It's, don't forget the experience that you've previously had. And this is something that, I've oftentimes kind of like had to push past the struggle of, is say, hey, I want to learn, we'll say, for instance, Unreal Engine. that's one that I want to go and tackle. I love the idea of it, you know, just different stuff, creating cool cinema, whatever. It's intimidating if you think about it that way. But if you're like, hey, I moved from, you know, say high school state into being a freelance artist that's working for myself, you know, like starting up a new company, doing up these different things, and then breaking that down into like smaller wins that, like, hey, I learned 3D already. I have the fundamental base. I've found a software I like. I've gone through, you know, learning Photoshop and learning photography and learning the gear and every other piece, right? At the end of the day, you're just adding another tool, you know, to your tool chest. And so, you know, for anybody that's really intimidated on this, like, just count your small wins, because they're a lot bigger than what you actually think they are. And so it's super important. I mean, I find myself doing that a lot. You know, crazy, like, happy accident. We have a newly remodeled bathroom upstairs because we had some water flooding. And this was right at the time of, you know, of COVID, like just after. And guess who got to be the contractor to remodel the bathroom? And so I realized, like, you know, what I'm saying actually travels to other things, right? Is that, you know, I learned by various different learning methods, including trial and error, like how to remodel a bathroom and how to, you know, fully, you know, complete that process. And so, you know, it doesn't just go, you know, specifically to this creative like style that we're in right now. It's really anything. Um, you know, push through it and count your small victories, and eventually they'll add up to being amazing.
Yeah, just keep going and start.
Yeah. Always start.
Yeah, you said already that we are short in time. You have some other appointments. Is there any work that you would love to feature from the whole gallery that you have on screen that you would love to have as the final shot and say, this is my next direction, or this is the direction that I have now?
Oh man. I mean, it's all like, actually looking at the whole thing, I'm just like, this is all a direction, right?
Okay.
I don't know that I honestly have a piece that is really, you know, one of those. Like, I have actually learned to stop hating my work after I complete it. Um, which has actually opened me up to liking a lot more of my work after I'm done with it. So I don't
And
know that there's anything specifically that I would look and say, hey, like, this is a hero. You know, realistically, it's probably this one.
okay,
Like,
be warm.
it's the first, you know, like, it's that first one. You know, because I honestly, until we were planning like this session and getting into it, I never really like thought, you know, in the past couple of years, like, let's go all the way back and like let's look at that first one. And I chuckled, like, I was like, whoa, you know, so like it is very important. So there's my hero. You can go look at that
Okay.
one and enjoy that little guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a wonderful last picture because it made it full circle. And the question that I have are way more extensive. We could fill 2 more shows based on that.
Right.
If there's interest, maybe the audience gives us a thumbs up at one point and say, hey, let's do another one. We want to know more about Dustin and his work and how he puts all these many pieces into his great work and gets always something spectacular out, even sometimes it's a happy accident. So I guess Noseman wants to do a wrap up. Noseman, wake up.
Hey, there he is.
Here I am. I was in the
Yeah.
background writing banners. Well, I want to thank everyone for being part of this very interesting discussion. And if you have any questions, don't forget to send an email at askthetrainer@maxon.net. Ask the Trainer without any spaces. And those are inspirations for us to deal with certain topics in the future. Don't forget to go to the maxon.net events page. Tomorrow we have VFX and Chill, and we have all sorts of things going on around the world. And on Monday, we continue our exploration of compositing 3D into videos and stills with 2.5D projections and all that interesting stuff. So I would like to thank, and let me remove this, I would like to thank our very good friends, Dustin and Dr. Sassi, for being here with us. Thank you, everyone, for participating. If we have no other closing statements, I will end the stream in just a few seconds. 3.
Awesome. Yeah,
2.
thanks everyone.
Thank you
Thanks,
for
Dustin.
being here.
Thanks, Thanasis. That was great. I loved it.
Good. And just remember all the quotes from Dustin. I made 50 cents an hour. All right, that's a good start.
create more and say less. Like that.
Yeah.
That's my go-to lately. So
My favorite one was I photoshopped the particles. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I really did. I screenshot and then it's
fantastic.
Yeah, you got to spruce it up sometimes.
You do have to. Well, again, thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye everyone. See ya.
Bye.